how do you get to yes for change management? That's a challenge or struggle that many of us have faced, where sometimes change management is just looked as a checkbox. I've been in organizations where they just said, do you have change management? Checkbox. But there isn't really that full buy-in for it.
We were selling to them a vision of a change adaptive organization. So we got away from the idea of, okay, project by project. And we took a look at all the personas in the organization. And so for our individual contributors and team leaders, rather than centralize a bloated, expensive army of change practitioners, how could we raise the bar for every persona in the organization to be their best at change?
To show value first. And if I started boiling the ocean at that point, I would have failed before I started, because I didn't have the big budgets, I didn't have the people. So I sat with the highest level of the CTO, and I said, what is your most important transformation? And what does value look like to you? So it's really just prioritizing, what would value look like right now? How can I show that?
We are always going to have some sort of disruption, right? Whether it's self-driven because there's a new project, whether it's something happened externally, we're always going to be reacting to something. And to me, having the ability to jump in, that's change. That's change leadership right there.
Welcome to Change Leadership Conversations, where we dive into what it takes to lead change in today's disruptive and fast-paced world. I'm Yvonne Rukia-Poveta, founder of the Change Leadership. We create change leadership training, conferences, content, courses, and community to support professionals and organizations. This conversation comes from the Change Leadership Conference, where we tackle a question many change managers have faced: getting to yes, building organizational buy-in for change. I'm joined by Silvia Fraser, Director, Workplace Strategy and Transformation, Metrolinx; Blake Bell, Head Global Change Enablement, Manulife; Esther Akinrinlola, Director, Change Management and Communications, McCain Foods, for a rich and practical discussion on building buy-in for organizational change, showing value early, and embedding change capability across the organization. Together, we explore what it takes to move change management beyond the checkbox activity, how to activate leaders and informal influencers, and why the future of change management is rooted in enablement, influence, and culture. I invite you to hit the follow button and stay connected with our change leadership community. Few of my favorite people here. So Esther, nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And she was the winner of the Change Innovator Award last year.
Yes.
Let's bring you here and tell us how you're innovating at McCain.
Yeah.
And then we have Blake. We worked at RBC together many years ago.
I drove her out. Yeah, to her own business. So you're welcome.
And now he's leading globally change enablement for Manulife. Great to have you join us. We want to see how you were able to get the yes. Silvia, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
You're doing so much around digital transformation in the workplace, and we can all appreciate that the workplace is transforming. How are you making that happen? Those are a few things we want to talk about.
It's magic.
I love that. Magic. So you're going to share the magic with us, because we all need a little bit of magic in our lives right now. I don't know which change leader here or change person doesn't need some magic. Do you wish you had some like dust, one of those
Fairy
things?
dust.
It's a fairy dust you could just sprinkle and you get no objection, no resistance. If they bottled that, how many people would buy it?
I have some with me right there.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to start with telling us your journey. Esther, I'm starting with you.
Okay.
From being an individual contributor to now having to drive internal capability for change management in your organization.
So funny story, I started my career as a computer engineer, and I did a lot of network and infrastructure, and I hated it, being on that side of it. And I realized I really loved all the people elements. So we would roll out new technologies, and I'm asking, so what does that mean for how people use this? I was the one asking the people the emotional questions, not the serious things. So what does this mean for business impacts and things like that? So I thought, I had to get out of here. So I did. I went in consulting for quite a really long time. And it was interesting. That was where I started to see the delineation. In consulting, you could be on the tech side or you could be on the people side. You could be everywhere. So I played the gamut a little bit. And I ended up supporting digital transformation. And I realized I had all the right skills about communication and training and all of those pieces. And I found out there was something for it. It's called change management. Great, let's do that. So I started to do change management a lot on digital transformations for large-scale organizations. And that was when I got called in to do something similar at McCain, to build that practice at McCain Foods. And that's what I'm doing now. And I've gone from, and when I started at McCain, it was interesting because we all get called in for this quick fix. It's like, we're doing this thing, come fix it. And then you get it, and then you realize there's an opportunity for this to actually be a capability. So show value and then build. Yeah. And I've been able to do that now. And I have a team of about 12 people, and we've grown a lot in the last 4 years. And that's how I've been able to go through that journey.
I like the win of the thread, show value.
Yes.
It's not about showing, oh, this is what change management will do, but show the value first. Love that.
Yeah.
Blake, I want to come to you. I have this pet peeve as a change manager, because I also do change management consultancy. When people think corporate communications is the same thing as communication and change management, anybody have that peeve? You know, they just... And Blake used to be in corporate communications before he started moving to change. So what's that journey been like, and how have you evolved?
Yeah, I left Rogers and after a career in customer service and operations in about 2007. I wrote my second book, and I leveraged those writing skills and my website design to land in communications. Ended up at RBC in 2013 in the IT space as a communications manager. And then when you're in the IT space, I'm sure you've all seen this, right? They're all building the best widgets, and then it sits on a shelf, and you're asking the question, shouldn't we think about the people who are actually going to use this before we build the best widget of all time? So eventually I just got sucked into that space, did my ProSci thing in 2017, and then my boss left RBC in 2022 to join Manulife, made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Ended up being there, supporting a group of about 300 people. A year later, elevated to supporting about 1,600. And then about 14 months later, now I'm supporting 40,000 people in the organization who had no enterprise change enablements at all. It was just willy-nilly, but all over the place. Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting journey. And yes, so a big part is really helping the organization understand and own their role in change and look at it from a persona-based perspective. So what does an HR business partner need in terms of upskilling, in terms of the tools that they might need to be their most effective, and how do all the parts fit together in the change journey? So where does project management start and begin? Where does change enablements factor in? Where do you hand off to comms to make those very clear delineations between who owns what? Because yes, we're part project managers, we're part communications manager, we're part change people, right? Until we're able to get in a position where you can set those clear boundaries, but it's definitely a journey.
Sylvia, I also want you to share a little bit about your journey, because you just even changed roles, right? So you are on a journey. And I want the audience to get to know you all, because you do have journeys that speak to what somebody might be going through right now and thinking about, where am I going in my career as a change leader? And change leader isn't a title, it's a being, right? So share.
Oh, for sure. Thank you. And thanks again for having me part of this great discussion and great, beautiful day. Full of learning. Learning is what actually has been one of my anchors throughout in my entire journey. I've had a quite of an unusual path, and I think many of us do, but I've moved in a lot of different fields, and what's constant is leading change and transformation. So I started my career in security. I was a security guard for the city of Toronto like 26 years ago. And I had no intentions of staying in security, but I got very interested in risk, actually. I became a Canadian risk manager. I've got a lot of learnings and a lot of research as well in the area of security risk management in particular. And from there, I started to grow into what safety meant. How can we make communities safe in the city of Toronto? So I worked in social development for quite a few years. I led a very inspiring program, the Tower Renewal Program, that looked at improving the quality of life of residents living in the apartment buildings and the areas of the city of Toronto where immigrants like myself would make their home for the first time in Toronto, in Canada. And so it opened my eyes, and I've always been driven by the curiosity and the looking for what can I make a change with? What's my purpose? How can I change, bring that transformation? And so I got a bit of a reputation for leading programs like that for City of Toronto, for City of Mississauga later, where I've transformed their security and enforcement program, and ultimately landed back at the City of Toronto, leading one of the largest transformative programs in the workplace. And so for the past 6 years, workplace strategy has been my focus. It is the topic that has been discussed on this stage many times, the future of work and the transition to hybrid, or transitions to really looking towards the future, and leading to the job that I hold today, which is the Director of Transformation Workplace Strategies for Metrolinx. So continuing that journey of looking at the future of work, how we work, where we work, when we work, and what is that ultimately the workplace experience. Again, the journey is going everywhere. I think what's important in any of our journeys is what is our anchor, what is the driver. And for me has been curiosity and learning and change. For me, it's always been around change.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, all of you. Next, I'm going to go to you, Blake. And this question is going to be for everybody. How do you get to yes for change management? That's a challenge or struggle that's many of us have faced, where sometimes change management is just looked as a checkbox. I've been in organizations where they just said, do you have change management? Checkbox. But there isn't really that full buy-in for it. So getting to that yes, moving change management from even a checkbox activity to real activity within an organization as a strategic enabler. What has that looked like in your experience? Because I know you've had a few successes in that area.
Yeah, I went from an individual contributor at a project-by-project basis and trying to get to yes with a sponsor or just a project team in general, now to an entire organization and their leadership team who, again, want to know, what is this going to do for me? What's in it for me? Prove to me that there's tangible evidence that this is going to work. And then what is this coalition going to look like? So when we first brought this to Manulife in the summer of last year, very hardcore questions right off the bat around, okay, does this exist outside of these walls? That's the maturity level we were talking about. So again, I remember calling on you at that point and saying, hey, would you have like studies, anything from Gartner, McKinsey, et cetera, because they all wanted to see examples of this happening so they could probably back it up to their bosses and say, hey, yeah, this is something
let's take
real.
it back. What were you selling to them at that point?
Yeah, we were selling to them a vision. Yeah, we were selling to them a vision of a change adaptive organization. So we got away from the idea of, okay, project by project. And we took a look at all the personas in the organization, and so far individual contributors and team leaders, rather than centralize a bloated, expensive army of change practitioners. How could we raise the bar for every persona in the organization to be their best at change? So my team is relatively small, but the stakeholders that I'm trying to empower and energize to do their best is 40,000 people. Ensuring that we could show that the first thing was ensure that, yes, there was the actual value for this via data, metrics, and case studies that have existed outside of our little sphere was super important. But then also, again, obviously what the value is going to provide for the business outcomes, as I heard somebody say earlier, very specific about what we're going to do, what we're going to bring to it, how much is this going to quote unquote cost you, the return on investment for investing at the very beginning of the process, what we call the conception phase, how that will pay off in the future stages around delivery and sustainment. That was big. But also we just trick them into building a coalition first. I talked about that in the book, friendships over frameworks. We just went out and grabbed as many people who knew that they needed this, and we built that coalition to where it was almost irresistible. It was like a tsunami coming back to those leaders saying, hey, we need this. You're going to actually put this into place as a center of excellence at the enterprise level. And they were like, good, keep going, keep moving. So the momentum really shifted. We didn't come in with a framework that we were going to police everybody with, a playbook. Those all came eventually, but really building a clear vision for how we're going to support an entire organization, not just project delivery, was key. Because now imagine a competitive advantage of having a 40,000 person organization be able to pivot very quickly when geopolitical forces happen, market forces happen, what a difference that can make in terms of the quality of what you deliver, the rate of how you deliver it, and then just the overall employee engagement and satisfaction around that too.
I love what you just said, because in all of it, you didn't mention things like tools or frameworks or methodologies or models. You mentioned data, which is something Mick talked about earlier, where he said, as change leaders and managers, we're good at people side of things. We have a heart for the people, but we forget our audience. We're good at knowing our audience as stakeholders, but we forget our audience, which is the people we're trying to influence, like the leaders, the decision makers. And that's where data comes in, because what is going to drive value for them is what's the bottom line.
And I can add to that.
Is the what's in it for me. Yeah, Esther, go ahead, because you had to bring in change management as a whole function.
Yeah, I had a bit of a different journey. Mine was more incremental. When I first got into my organization, the question was, where do I start first? Because it was important to show value first. And if I started boiling the ocean at that point, I would have failed before I started, because I didn't have the big budgets, I didn't have the people. So it's like, what are my lean resources right now? Where do I start first? So I start with the highest level, the CTO, and I said, what is your most important transformation? And what does value look like to you? If we answer these 3 questions, then does that get you on board that change management is important? Because theoretically, we know it's important, but then when you talk to 5 different people, what is change management? You get 5 different answers. So definitely, why does it matter to you? You get maybe 15 different answers. So for you, particularly the sponsor, why does it matter to you? And who are the other voices who need to be aligned? So I started with an accelerator. I called it my accelerator. So I picked that program, did a lot of research on a couple of other things that were very important for me. Historical context around the organization. What has been the perception of change management in the organization? Right? And what has been the reception to it? Sometimes you get this gut-wrenching recoil when you mention change management and you realize, oh, there's a lot of history here that I probably need to get involved in. So it was first understanding that, but also understanding the environment. Where in the maturity journey was the organization? Because everything might not be important right now. So it's really just prioritizing what would value look like right now? How can I show that? So that was where I first started. I took that accelerator. I figured out what value looks like. I aligned very closely with my sponsors and also started to build an informal set of change leaders who became my sounding board for different reasons. Organizational context, where the bodies are buried. Just really understanding the different things. And then they became my coalition. So I would go back and test, would this land, right? So when that succeeded, it opened up the door. So at that point, it was no longer showing value anymore. The next thing was I needed to build capability quick, because again, to your point, no one's going to give you a team of 30 people. So how do we build capability and start to separate between change capability as a skill set, but change management behavior, culture as how do we all think about change management? How do we all approach it? So the next thing for me was capability building. Right? Activating leaders. What is your role as a leader in change? When we say change, what do we mean? It was also what do we not mean in the context of the organization? Because again, depending on where you are in your organization, people expect you to be everything. You also need to figure out where you really have your strengths and focus there. So I always start my conversations with, hi, I'm Esther at Change Management. Here's what we do. Here's what we do not do. At least not right now. And that was the next stage for me. And then very quickly, the purse strings opened up, and then I was able to then build
like that, the purse strings opened up.
So you need to, for me, it was very incremental.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Silvia, I want to move to you and talk a little bit about culture, that balance between when we think about the practice versus the resources available versus bringing you in and, okay, yes, we want to do change management, but what does that really mean? And even balancing culture, especially public sector, right? What does that all look like for change management?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. See, in public service, we have no resource problem, right? So you don't have to worry about that. Joking aside, I think any organization will question, right, the amount of resources and what do you need them for and so forth. And the journey that I've taken has been that from the place of leadership. So whether you're looking at you're just a people leader, you have staff reporting into you, to me, change is embedded into the function. So with a rather small team, fairly large, of 20 people, we started with one change management advisor. That's all we had. And that was to change the behavior of 40,000. And think about that. It's unreasonable to believe that any organization will say, sure, no problem. Here's a team, we'll dedicate it to change. So the approach that I've taken was to really use the cultural piece, meaning in 48,000, 8,000 now, there's no way that we know everything that is happening. There are cultures and subcultures in teams, in divisions, teams, departments, and we need to leverage the change ambassadors that are within those teams. So the approach has always been, I can't change the behavior of my 19-year-old, right? There's no way. But he can communicate with people that can understand the language. And that's really the idea here, is to use force multipliers to really tap into those ambassadors who reside within the different spaces, the workplaces, and tap into and provide them the tools. Tap into the people leaders throughout the organization and make sure that they have an understanding what change management is, just that very basic understanding, because if they don't understand the change, how can they support their teams?
Yeah.
We come in with a large transformation. We as change leaders, we say, yes, we're going to come in and do this. Part of the change strategy should always be engaging the various stakeholders. And when I talk about that, I've talked about people leaders, the front lines, the dedicated change ambassadors within the teams, but also the different layers within the organization from a governance perspective. Because when there's a major transformation, we know it's throughout, and it has to be supported. There needs to be a process, an actual thorough strategy and process in place for that change. And it starts with getting that buy-in at the highest level within the organization. And so that messages and the change is actually communicated from different levels of the organization. So to me, change is actually through influence, and it's not so much about having dedicated resources. Yes, you do need dedicated resources, and you tap into those particular expertise, many of you in the room here, that lead the change story development and lead the tactical change and the strategy. But you need to have a thorough approach that involves the organization. Change management reminds me of, I mentioned my background in risk and in security. You can't come in and say, you need to be afraid of this. Risk is something that we first put out. Nobody wants to hear about it. Now, when you go into organization, part of your onboarding is cybersecurity training. You just take it as is. Change management is on that journey to become part of the day-to-day. And I think as change leaders, we need to bring to our organizations that awareness and education around what the change management as a profession is, and so that it's embedded within the skills that we require for our people leaders, the skills that we require, so it's embedded within the culture right off the bat, so that we have a great adoption process from the beginning.
I love what you've said, and Blake also said that as well, in terms of we cannot do it alone as change managers. We also have to build that army, and that's where it comes into equipping other people in the organization to be able to lead change. And I love that organizations who reach out to me and I do training for them. And it's really about how can we equip the other leaders in the organizations to lead change, because it makes the work of that team much easier when everybody is rowing in the same direction or a similar direction. And when you go to speak to them, you're talking the same language because they get where you're coming from, because they have that same background or they have that basic knowledge, like you mentioned. Even if it's just basic knowledge, it just makes the work easier because there's so much change happening and we can't do it all by ourselves within the organization. I want to come back to you, Blake. What are some of the biggest challenges you'd say you faced in embedding change management within your organization, and how did you overcome them?
The first thing we did was we ditched calling it change management. I don't know about anybody in this room, but I hate managing anything, right? I was so hardened last year when I came to this conference for the first time, and there were people, I think, Marissa, you were here. Were you not here last year too? And change enablement. And I was like, oh, thank God. I've been calling it this for 5 years, and I felt like I was alone on an island, but that's the benefits of fellowship. So there was that, right? People wanted to understand that you're not there to manage something down the pipe. You're there to empower and energize an organization by ensuring that they can be their best at change, and that starts enabling it up front. People ask me, oh, how do you manage resistance, or how do you manage fatigue? And I go, I don't. I do everything I can to get ahead of it by ensuring that we're tapping it right at the start, making sure, as you said, that across the whole organization, really it's these change adaptive characteristics that we're trying to embed in the organization's DNA so that we can speak that common language. And even now, as I look out to the future, we're starting to have debates around, should we even be calling this change? Now, forget about it, right? Is it evolution? What is it? Because it's just, there's no more BAU, and then there's a change happening, and there's BAU. How do you get the organization past the mindset that change will somehow stop, get easier, slow down? It's just moving from thing to thing.
Let me challenge you there for a second. I get that. Let's not call change management. But what about a language they understand? So I'm almost like saying, okay, maybe let's not call it change management because it has a preconceived idea about it. But when you don't call it change, what else will you be calling it? What? A task? What is it?
That, I think, is the fascinating journey that we have, what I just said, we have to face going forward, right? The idea that, there's change and there's something else and there's change. You have to get an entire organization beyond, especially our individual contributors and team leaders, right? You have to get them beyond the fact that there's this thing that happens and you're back down here and then maybe eventually another thing happening. It's like this all the time.
You know what? I'm just challenging you a bit. I remember when I thought there was nothing like, nobody could be driving driverless cars. There'll be nothing like that. And I'm seeing it happen right now. So we could probably get to a place where change is no longer called change.
I see it coming. I see it coming in the next 5 years. It's reality.
We'll call it something else.
Turn our brand up. But this gets down to the brand proposition that you all have to face, right? How do I get to a yes? If they literally think that all you're going to do is come in and just task and just take this project from here to here and then walk away, they're not as interested in that anymore. They want to know, how can I move people on a dime? Anything could happen tomorrow that could change our entire business. How do I move them on the dime? And if I just keep calling that change, it's not resonating with senior leaders.
Yeah, when people hear the word change, it creates something else. So Esther, let me get to you. You get to the yes. They've now adopted change management as a practice. Leadership is on board with it. Yes, we really need change management or change something within the organization. How do you move hearts and mindsets within the organization? Because it's one thing to say yes to bring in change management. It's a different whole thing for people on the projects or the people, the teams or the stakeholders to embrace the practice of it. What's that been like for you?
So for those of us who still call it change management, I think one of the things that after you get your leadership buy-in, one of the things that we try to do is, my own pet peeve from a change management perspective is you being the team over there, separate from everybody else, right? So one of the things I try to do is, even though my team is my team, they're embedded in the delivery teams. So you're not separate, you're not sticking out, and you don't get forgotten, right? So that's one way you get by, where there's partnership. You're seen as a partner, You're seen as a collaborator. You're seen as on the same side of the desk, right? So that's number one. The second part for me is, I think we mentioned in one of the conversations today, if you don't talk about what you do, there's going to be different definitions of what it is. So how do you bring that thought leadership even to the conversations where you make things because there's so much mystery about what it is, how do you demystify it? And that's even in the conversations. As you share knowledge, how do you demystify it? How do you make sure that you're using the same terminologies that people can relate to in a simple way that it's consumable? The other part is we don't do these things where we design in isolation. So embedded in the change in the project plans, embedded in the delivery plans, we're building together. So even when you have things like communications that need to go out, we're partnering together, because even though we have the change expertise, you have the technical expertise, we all bring different expertise to the table. So we create together in a way where we're being the coaches, the guides to help you to figure out what you need to get to.
But okay, let me stop you a second, because I'm like thinking, having just been to many organizations, change management in practice embedded into it, they have to call. How do you shift the mindset within the projects for them to really say, we really need Esther in on this, and we need Esther or Esther's team at the beginning of it, and it's not a hindsight, it's not when it's in the messy middle, it's not when it's that ending stage, there's fires to resolve. People really understanding what change management is really about and really wanting it and not locking you out.
So anybody that has cracked the code on that, please come find me after. I'm very curious to learn, because I still have situations, even in my career, where I'm knocking on doors or I get called in 3 weeks before go live. So let's just put it out there. I haven't cracked the code on that. But what has happened is, because we've now built that capability to a point where we've shown what it is and what it could do, and we've shown value, we get called in. So our work now speaks for itself. So I would say consistency, 100%, is one way. The other part of that too is talking about what you do. God knows how many meetings I invited myself to, because I figured I have to be there. So I did all of that at the beginning, where I'm like, I think I should be here and listening, but also showing humility. And every time I even start on anything, I always start by saying, I'm not the expert in any way. I'm going to ask a lot of questions, but I'm hoping that we can figure it out together. So that just opens it up to being a journey that we're going on together. I'm not coming to shove anything down your throat. Yeah. I think for me, it's transparency. It's talking about what we do, but it's consistently showing up. And I think one of the other things too that I'm starting to encourage me and my team to do is also, when you do your retrospectives or when you go through something together and things didn't work, is also the humility to admit that, okay, we dropped the ball on that. Here's how we can do it better going forward. But it's never an us versus them. It always has to be together.
I like that.
Working towards a shared goal.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Sylvia, I want to continue on the same question as well. How do you make it real for people, and it's not like, okay, they've said we should do it, but they invite you into those meetings, or even your teams?
For us as a program, and I've experienced this through the many transformative initiatives, is that value and what value means at different layers within the organization, and being aware of what that is. The top of the organization may not even know what it is that you do fully. And so if you ever go to a meeting and you ask, oh, I didn't know you do this, or I wonder where I should do this, and they don't know that you do it, that's a problem. So it starts with a very basic understanding of scope. Does the top of the organization know what the scope of that function is? And what is then the value that it brings to the organization? And are we able to articulate? And again, different layers within the organization will have different understanding. To me, it's three-pronged. It starts with the team. Do you know what your scope is and what it is that you're doing? And can you articulate, and what is the value? But then there is the people you work for. So that's the organization. Do they know what it is? And can you articulate that? And then there are your clients, your customers, the people that you provide a service to. Do they know what it is that you do? And are you able to articulate that value in a way that they actually understand? Do they know what the expectation is? Can you put it into the language that they actually can? To me, it takes the three-pronged approach to really provide that value-based model, to really say, here's what we provide. And being able to speak to the different audiences. We've heard earlier about the power of communicating and being able to juggle between the different things. We loosely talk KPIs and how do we show this and that. KPIs can be different in the different layers of the organization. In terms of how do you show that, it's first understanding, are you able to educate and provide that awareness and clarity? To me, it's about clarity. And second, it's about leadership. So the word that I was going to say, how do you call change? To me, is leadership. Aren't we all leading?
Yeah.
To me, it's leadership.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get everyone's attention to a word that's there that kind of caught my eye since we came in, and which is disruption, right? Is disrupt. We are always going to have some sort of disruption, right? Whether it's self-driven because there's a new project, whether it's something happened externally, we're always going to be reacting to something. And to me, having the ability to jump in, that's change. That's change leadership right there.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. I really what you said there in terms of, even though you said we need to define our scope, we need to define what it is we do. I like that you use the word value. So it's not really about going in there with, oh, I'm a change manager, this is change management, and trying to describe change management. But like what we do, it's like what 101, what is the benefit? What is the value? That's what people buy into, the value and the benefit. And I think it's been said time and time over and over again on the stages. People buy into the value and the benefit and the what's into them before they buy into the title and the description of what that role is, but more what they can get from it. Thank you.
I have a question for Blake. I think it's super fascinating how you've described the journey for Manulife, and I'm wondering, are there any challenges that you're expecting with your mandate given the global scale of Manulife through John Hancock and Manulife Asia? Just wanted to hear a bit about that.
Yeah, a little bit. No, to the point, right? I'm trying to get half my team 12 hours away. So you have trying to bring one common language and one approach to, we have 11 different countries in Asia. And then, as you said, in the US, etc. And we just opened up an office in India. So again, how do you, again, win friendships? How do you bring people together to share their success stories on how they've done it, and then incorporate that into the overall approach that you're going to take? Because again, if I come here from my white privileged North American perspective and dictate that this is the way this is going to happen because I'm some genius who dropped out of the sky, it's going to get flattened. So we did not take that approach. We made sure that we reached out to as broad a group of stakeholders as we could at various levels. And you talk about cracking the code, right? It's around how do you get to yes and get in leadership, right? It's become like a whole brain thinker. Through that type of developments and the high EQ, right? I feel I'm in a good place to be able to talk to people who are techie people who are people who are analytical, people who are strategic planners. And most people, especially in leadership, they hire or they bring you in or they buy into you based on a double-sided coin of hope or fear, right? They look at you and yes, you can get shared success stories to back it up, but they look at you and they go, does this person get it? Are they going to make me look bad or good to my boss? And that whole brain thinking really helps your brand in making them think that, yeah, they get it.
Yeah.
I can trust this person. They're going to deliver value, as they said, and they've shown it genuinely and authentically over time, especially by ensuring that broad base is covered.
Thank you.
We've got a very powerful question. How do you combat the negative reactions to the concept of change management? We recently kicked off a change management movement within our company, and immediately the leader group were speculating about layoffs.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the things I had to deal with in my own experience. But before I had any big movement, I actually took the time to learn historical context. What has happened, what has failed, and why? And what emotions would it trigger in people? So in that case specifically, I'll be curious to know if on the back of that, you've actually gone back to check, why are people reacting negatively to that? What exactly is it? And the fact that people immediately tie change management to layoffs means there's probably a story there, right? But then how do you then, and when you dig deep into things like that, you will realize maybe when that happened, there was a lot of hush, nobody said a lot of stuff, and then things happened. So people already do not trust. So I would almost want to have focus group discussions. Why does this trigger this emotion? Then the second part is, how can we then get out of that by transparently communicating often, even if there will be, leading with that, because people also want to know what the end game is, not that it got played. The other part is, you probably also want to get informal influencers too, who would then be a very core network of support as you start this new journey. So maybe go away from certain words and certain practices that failed in the past, but you also need people, because that's how you also get your input, your feedback, and all of that. So it keeps helping you be better. But I would really be curious. There was probably something really bad that happened in the past that you want to get the context of so that you're avoiding those pitfalls in the future.
Thank you for that.
I'm just wondering if you've had experience with unions and how you get their buy-in, their yes.
One of the best advice I would give is to bring them in as early as possible, to actually speak to the union leadership about the change that you're about to bring, and get their thoughts into what might work. They're a very influential party. They are representing probably a larger part of the organization. And my experience with the labor unions have been to bring them in as early as possible and bring them in and have the discussion with them. Don't even say, here's what we're doing, but bring them in and ask them some of those key questions around how do they see the change going. And I would say, shying away from bringing the labor unions early, it's a huge risk. And I have seen it done in other organizations. It never turns, because it creates a sense of mistrust.
I love what you said, Sylvia. And I feel that is something that we can take across, but any change that it is we're doing, bringing people in early. And when you bring people in early into the change, they feel more involved and they want to support that change that they're doing. The unions just seem to be harder just because they have, in quotes, more power, so they can exercise more power, so it feels harder. But every human being wants to be involved in that change process. And if we can bring people in early, it makes all the difference in the support that they'll give you. So please give my panel a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Change Leadership Conversations. Be sure to hit the follow button, leave us a review, and share this podcast with your team or fellow change leaders, because leading change is better when we do it together. For more insights about our Change Leadership Training, Change Leadership Conference, or free resources to help you lead and respond to change, visit thechangeleadership.com. Until next time, keep leading change.